Hello, welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast. I'm Paul Zeidman. Unfortunately, my co-host Justin Sloan could not make it today, so it's just me and my extremely talented and versatile guest, Charles D'Amico. Charles, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great, and thank you for being here. Charles is, let's see, he's a writer. He's also a publisher, and I think he's got a few other job titles under his belt, but we'll get into all of that in just a minute. So first, as regular listeners of the show or viewers are familiar with, we start out talking about like anything we've read or watched lately that may have struck a chord. And I haven't been able to catch up on my movie watching lately. I'm hoping to kind of pick up on that in the next couple of days, but I did just finish watching the What If series from Marvel on Disney Plus. They kind of like, little snippet of stories in other multiverses, but they all involve, a lot of the Marvel characters from the movies, and they got a lot of the same actors to do their voices. And it's fun. I enjoyed the comics back in the day, but I enjoyed it. And they already have plans for a third season coming out, so that's exciting for me. I enjoy it. If you like Marvel, you like multiverse kinds of stories, you can't go wrong. Charles, what about you?
I've just finished three different audiobooks.
Wow.
David Grohl's new one, The Storyteller, was amazing. I'm Foo Fighters, like who doesn't like them? They're okay, but I've never been like a diehard fan. But the story
Mhm.
and the way he told it was awesome. Patrick Stewart's book, memoir I just finished, also amazing. I'm halfway through the gene editing book by Walter Isaacson. And then latest movies, I've seen every cartoon out there. I've got an 8 and a 10 year old. I'd probably watch them if I didn't have kids, but I do always laugh, when it comes to writing. When the stories, there's like shortcuts, right, in movies that you can't get away with in a book. So I would say I like The Wish, even though a lot of people didn't. I thought it was
Hmm.
pretty good.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to Echo.
That is
Getting
not
like,
for kids.
no, that is not. Although I'm not the best parent. I mean, I swear on my kids, so they don't swear, which still my dad thinks is the most amazing thing in the world. But
Hmm.
yeah, I'd say Echo I'm looking forward to, and I've done a lot of audiobooks. I've been watching a lot of old shows. Like I've rewatched West Wing, I think, for the 200th time,
Hmm.
and right now I'm rewatching MASH. When I'm
Oh,
doing
wow.
a lot of work and writing, I try to stick to old things that don't take a ton of my attention, so that it doesn't kind of mess with my creative process when I finally sit down and write.
So
So
it
I
doesn't
suppose,
so it doesn't influence your mindset when you're sitting
right,
down to
because
do
it's
your
just
own
vanilla.
stuff.
I already know what's coming, and my brain's not like, oh, what's that? It's just more
Oh.
like, yeah.
I real quick question for the Patrick Stewart memoir. Is he the narrator of it?
Yes, which made it 100 times better. It was like, he just has a way of delivering things.
He's
Like,
got that voice.
yeah.
That's great. Okay,
And
so Charles.
David
Oh.
Grohl did his own too. They both did them. It was actually
Mhm.
pretty cool.
That's great. Yeah, audiobooks, I'm not as into them. No, I have nothing against them. My wife really likes them, and she introduced my daughter to them, so she occasionally does them. But I'm happy to say my daughter also really likes, actual books. She has a Kindle, but she also likes getting actual books to hold, which, warms my heart.
I do both. Once I get done with an audiobook, I buy the hardcover, usually
Hmm.
used, but I've also been known to do both, like read it on like on my Remarkable tablet or on my phone while
Hmm.
listening to it. So I'm one of those Geminis. My brain works multiple avenues.
Okay, now we're bringing astrology into this. Oh man. Okay, so all right. So Charles, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like a lot of the people we have on are writers. So you're a writer. So were you one of those types like you were a writer since you were a kid, or like you were averse to it, and then like something happened along the way. You kind of like, hey, I got a bit of a knack for this. And I think I'm going to do this some more. So what is your story?
Mine is not the normal story. I've been to plenty of conventions and I rarely have anyone who has the similar. I got into writing because I didn't like reading.
Hmm, okay. Can you
But
elaborate on that?
let's unpack this. Okay. So I've always been a nerd. Like I love nonfiction. I love history books, science books, but fiction stories, just nothing felt good.
Hmm.
Nothing flowed. I would read it for school, but would struggle. But then I could pick up a history book and I'd be fine. And I dislocated my ankle, I want to say early 20s. It's right after college. And I was bored of the video games and stuff pretty quickly and decided my sister's like, read. I'm like, there's nothing I like. I was like, I'm going to write a book. She got mad at me. She's like, you don't read enough to write a book. So out of spite, I decided to write a book. And then I wrote a second book. And the two books sat in a drawer for like 10 years. And then about a year before COVID, I started writing and editing again, and then just couldn't stop.
Wow. So what was it? What was the book that you wrote?
The first book in my series, Veritas, the Neil Baggio series, and
Hmm.
then the follow up to it, Ave Maria. I mean, the versions that I wrote then versus what made it to the shelves, maybe 50%.
Okay.
but
Okay.
but it was, I mean, I wrote 90,000 words two times, two books in like 3 months. So
Okay, that's great.
yeah.
That's great. Sorry if anyone can hear it, my dog is going crazy because somebody just rang the doorbell in the front, and I can't go and quiet her down. We'll be okay. Okay, so I was looking into your bio a bit. So it said you had a degree in criminology and psychology, and then you worked in the restaurant industry, and you kind of alluded to this. You hurt your foot, broke your ankle. So like, is that where the writing came in? I mean, what was that sudden transition? I mean, you had you doing these non-writing things. Like what was it like I'm going to make a hard right turn and go into writing.
I've always been a storyteller for coaching.
Okay.
Uh, I'm not the usual come right at a person and be like, you need to do A, B, and C. I'm very big on an analogy or equating, putting things in a different context that someone can absorb.
Hmm.
Even making up stories. I can't tell how many times I've told somebody, my grandmother gave me this advice. It's my advice, but I've learned some people just prefer this like sage third party person that passed it down for generations. So
Hmm.
it's easier to absorb. So I've been creating stories in a different context for a long time. Um, and when I sat down, it was just fun.
Hmm.
Um, I write a lot of first person present tense. Most of my books have been described as if you're reading TV. They go really fast. And I broke a lot of rules. I know because my editing staff yelled at me for years. And when I had one or two books, everybody, I got a lot of flack for it. Now that I got seven. Oh, that's your style. It's like, oh,
Hmm.
but that's really where it came from. I've always kind of had that storytelling in me. I just had never, I think, had a reason to finally sit down and relax. And I couldn't move. I dislocated my ankle. I had to keep it above my head for 2.5, 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And I just
Okay.
sat there and absorbed myself in the world. And then didn't write for a while. And then I started doing content writing for ghostwriting blogs for banks. Weird thing I did
Hmm.
for about 6 months, but it
Okay.
got me writing again. And that editor was so brutal, like just rough with me. One day I asked him, I was like, would you read something I wrote? And he's like, this is good, but you need a real, like, editor, not a small content editor.
Hmm.
And then I looked for one and couldn't stop.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Okay, so you talked about this, that one of your first efforts was the first of your Neil Baggio series. So what was the inspiration for that?
Well, my background in studying was criminology and psychology. And I think part of it was because I was taking a pivot and realized I don't do well with bosses. And I'm
Okay.
not really like even my teachers, I'm really good at working in the gray. I think if I'd have been a cross country runner who hadn't had a knee surgery, maybe I would have gone a different path. But I was studying, I was supposed to go in the military and essentially try to transfer to the NSA, destroyed my knee my junior year of college
Hmm.
and had another injury. So my plans had to kind of veer. And I think what that writing allowed me to do was use my imagination of, well, what if I was able to use these skills, right? And that's kind of I think how it started. Without realizing it, it was the therapy of wondering what if, which is funny because you just brought up the series What If with Marvel. So
Right. Okay. So for those who are unaware of your series, so who is Neil Baggio and what kind of stories are they?
so it's a suspense thriller series. The whole idea behind the series is his boss, Frank Capilano, who mentors him in the FBI, goes on a killing spree. The book picks up 4 years after he can't catch him and he leaves the FBI. In that time frame, you learn Neil creates a private investment firm, kind of goes on his own because he's tired of like me dealing with bosses, and he gets called back to the FBI when the killer comes out of hiding, and it's him navigating this world where he's got to follow the rules no matter what, and then the other side where he gets to control and do whatever he wants and operate in the gray, and it's a chase, him chasing his boss, and that's book one, and two is kind of a veer off. It's just kind of a fun story. I didn't want to get tied into the same timeline.
Sure.
Three picks up where it wanted to be. Four keeps it going. Book five is a female spinoff character that just came out. Purdue is doing really well. Start open in November. And then right now I'm working on Frank's journal, which is the viewpoint of Frank from being an FBI agent, his first kill, and then how he psychologically breaks down and becomes the killer that shows up in the first book.
Oh,
So
and you said there are seven books total?
I've got 5 in the series out. Book 6 is One Golden Day. It's like a self-help book
Okay.
hidden in a fiction novel. And then I'm working on books 7, 8, 9, and 10. They're all in like their third or fourth rough drafts right now. So
So, okay, so real quick about like the whole character and the world that that's set in. I mean, you said you studied criminology and psychology. So was that kind of like the foundation for this character, and then you decided, oh, I'm going to explore this even more? Did that require you to do more research, or was that part of your education that you just kind of you already had a window into this kind of world?
yeah, a little of both. I've actually had FBI agents, like friends of mine or colleagues, college professors that were retired, said reading my books is more like what it's like in law enforcement, more than like what you see on TV, and which kind of made me feel good. But it was because I focus on the mental aspect, meaning yes, it'd be nice if something happened in 2 seconds, but it really doesn't, right? So it's more like the profiling of both the main character, how he sees the world. You learn more about all these other characters through conversation, and it's the first one's a chase, the second one's a mystery, the third one introduces a new bad guy alongside the original, and it's just been fun. And the Marie Perdita series, which is the fifth one out there, Purdue, it's a female character. Her spinoff is going into this whole international like history going back to like the early Medici's. So I get to have fun researching and writing different things. And I even wrote a spin-off Western because I wanted to test my brain to how could I solve all these crimes without technology and how could I create these worlds without technology. And my editor and my vice president, they always laugh. Like most writers aren't trying to make it harder on a regular basis.
Okay.
But I like that. I like challenging myself, creating a different world, not necessarily a different world, but creating like challenging the reader and myself, right? So that
Mhm.
it's not just that you didn't see it coming, but you tap into your characters, the people in your life. I use empathy a lot, meaning how you would create and see this person in real life, and then try to rationalize. Well, you might not hate the bad guy, but now you're conflicted because you're like, wait. I shouldn't like this person, So I toy a lot with people's emotions.
Okay, so okay, this is kind of a tricky question for me. So a lot of times I'll ask a writer like, what were some of your influences? But you were also saying that you weren't really much of a reader.
So
So
this one you might like, Aaron
okay,
Sorkin.
okay.
Um, I love The West Wing. I liked A Few Good Men, even the play. Um, I read scripts more than I read books, especially the last couple of years. Um, I think because I like to understand and learn dialogue,
Hmm.
so that because I feel a lot of books struggle with it, and you end up spending like the Dan Browns of the world. You spend half the book learning about the parquet floor, but the story doesn't get moved along, right? And life is about the interaction. Life is about the people you talk to, or you're sitting there, maybe you're stuck at work and you can't think of something, but you're having a random conversation with a friend of yours, has nothing to do with work. Then your brain clicks because something is that they said reminds you of something, and now you've connected the dots and you can solve a problem. But those happen through conversation. So I try to really draw a lot on conversation, which is why I think I like Aaron Sorkin, because people always laughed in West Wing. There'd be those one shots where nothing happens but two people walking,
Hmm.
but the dialogue would carry the scene. And I think that's why I always liked them.
So is that something like you kind of split your books, like it's like half, like we'll call it action and half dialogue?
The dialogue does carry a lot of action. It's really hard to describe.
Okay.
Most of the people who've edited my books in the beginning got mad at me, and I fought back, but then I had to meet in the middle, like dialogue tags. I actually had two award-winning authors tell me that you can't write without dialogue tags. And I said, if you can't follow two people talking with proper references, right? Like one person saying maybe the other person's name or pointing something out. Yes, occasional, but you don't need it every time. I
Hmm.
was like, I can't help you. You can watch a TV show, turn your back, and you can tell by the dialect, the voice, and the tone who's talking. And I try really hard to make sure my writing does the same thing.
Okay. That's great. That's great. It sounds fascinating. And also the fact that you're kind of it's a unique approach to a thriller, that's because that's where the first thing that comes to mind, and that's not what you would think of when it comes to a thriller. You have like a certain mindset of like this is how a thriller should play out, but it sounds like you're doing something totally different, but it's of your own invention and it's intentional, which is great.
Yeah, because there was just nothing I liked, and it was just like, I want to write my what I would want to read. Um, a couple years ago, Veritas and Colloquium, the third book, so book one and three,
Hmm.
both won Pencraft awards, and in the same year. And I remember I didn't know. I actually deleted the email, and one of our other authors at Blue Handle won a Pencraft and was looking into it, and my editorial director was looking at the website to see if he knew anybody else that won. He's like, bro, you won two this year. And I go, is that a big deal? And he's like, I hate you sometimes. He's like, he's like, you won two in the same year and you went meh. And I'm like, hey, I don't know. It's like, do we make more money because of it? And then our vice president's like, well, yeah, you'll sell more books because you can say, award-winning author. So,
Ah.
it's cool knowing that other people like it, and they're starting to understand it. And, like most writers, your first two books, you want to cry,
Hmm.
when you look back, you're like, oh, but luckily for me, I wrote so much. I wrote 1 million words in about 14 months.
Wow.
I wrote 14 books, some rough drafts, some 2, 3 versions.
Hmm.
So I've got what 7 in the Neil Baggio series. So 4 are out, but I've got 3 more. I'm in the third round of edits on one of them. Frank's Journal, which is kind of a one-off. I've got 3 in the Marie Perdita series, and then the Western spinoff. I wrote all those in the kind of 14-month window.
Whew,
Once I
wow. That
started, I just couldn't stop.
Wow, that is very prolific. So okay, so it's on your hat, and you just mentioned it. So Blue Handle Publishing, and also in your bio talks about Book Puma editing. So tell us a little bit about them. Like, where do they come from, and what's your involvement with them?
So Blue Handle Publishing came from when I first started looking for a literary agent, like many of us do. When you are starting in this process, you've got a couple different options. Big five traditional publishing, you have to find an agent and they shop it for you. Indie publishing, which is what Blue Handle is, where you just kind of go direct to publisher. Hybrid, which used to be called vanity publishing, where you pay to get it out there, and then self-publishing, where you just do it all yourself. Um, when I was going through the process, I had a couple agents tell me that they liked the writing and the story was really good, but it doesn't fit, for lack of a better phrase, CBS formatting. Like sometimes, the big five is looking for Friends, NCIS, like they have a format, right? Which
Hmm.
is okay. Like not everybody wants to watch, the piano or Schindler's List. Sometimes you want to turn on the TV for 30 minutes to an hour and just be distracted. And that's okay. But that's what they sell. And the agents one of them was really brutally honest. She said, how bad do you need the money? And I was like, I'm not broke, but I mean, how much money are we talking? And she's like, 50 to 100K. And I was like, but what's it going to cost? She's like, you'd have to change the way you write the format. The
Hmm.
story's awesome, but you have a lot of dialogue and I'm like, I got into writing because I wanted to write my way. So I didn't like the other stuff. And she's like, good answer. She was like, I suggest you self-publish. So the more I looked, and then once you build a network and a following, the big five is not going to make you change it anyways, right? You already have a calling card. The more I looked into it, the more I realized this is really hard and a pain in the butt. And I was like, if I'm going to do all this work, I might as well help other people along the way. Even if it's only 1 or 2 a year, why not? Right? Like, if
Hmm.
I'm going to spend this energy learning it. And I also learned real fast having a logo and a company and an EIN allowed me to put my books up for award. You can't do when you're self-published. So the more I learned that stuff, the more I was like, let's create a company. I also have a problem with logos. I really like doing it. I love creating brands. Like I've got the Marie Perdita logo. I've got a Neil Baggio logo. I sell T-shirts with my tattoo on it. I have a problem. All of our authors in Blue Handle have their own specific brand that
Okay.
goes on the sign that they get to keep. Um, so creating the company started like that. In the beginning, it was just me and 2 authors that I signed locally. And then I had a girl reach out to me, a lady who worked for Workman Publishing in New York, came home during COVID, didn't want to go back to New York. And she had read an article about us in the local newspaper. And she's like, I'd love to come work for you. I don't know your what kind of company it is. I'm like, well, the company of one me. And as Madison, who's our vice president. And then when we were researching the company and trying to figure out what we needed to do, I was talking to authors. I met this guy, Ricky, who spent 2 hours talking about editing and how much he loved it. And a couple weeks later, we were in a different meeting for web development. And I had this idea, man, it'd be great to have an editing platform too, because so many people, editing is this weird industry where there's a lot of one-offs. And
Hmm.
honestly, a lot of the big companies, they're really expensive, like crazy expensive. And I wanted to create something fun and lower the bar and make it more about coaching and cultivating. And that's where Book Puma came in. So the idea for Book Puma, the physical name, started years ago before I even had a company. I just hated the idea of bookworm. I thought it was lame. So
Okay.
I randomly for 2 weeks toyed around with rebranding the idea of bookworm to Book Puma. And
Hmm.
then it sat in a folder on my computer for like a year. And then when we decided to create an editing firm, I'm like, I got it. I was like pivot, the good old entrepreneurial spirit, right? Like
Hmm.
you run down the hole and you save it for a later date, and then when you can, you use it. And Book Puma is now this really cool platform that allows you to do monthly memberships as low as $8 a month, and then you can pay a la carte for other things, edit a page, talk to a consultant, get access to things. We wanted to make the entry for editing low and attainable because it can be so expensive. And it's, you said you had an editor who helped you with writing, correct?
Well, yeah. So yeah, as we were talking that I had these three screenwriting books and I, tried to do it myself and that was just a disaster. And I connected with a friend of mine and she said, "Oh, yeah, I can help you out." And like I said, she was a godsend. She really took over the steering and just got it to the finish line.
But most people who go through editing, maybe from who you've talked to on these platforms or just met, editing is normally, I always equate it to this. They'll mark up your thing and then they'll hand it back to you, and it's your decision to make the change. But you're spending a lot of money for somebody smarter than you to help you.
Hmm.
And I always imagine you hired a general contractor to fix your bathroom, and they gave you the plans and they flagged everything that was wrong. They charged you the full amount and then they left and said, "Well, it's your bathroom. Don't you want to do it?" And that's kind of how editing a manuscript is.
Hmm.
And I remember one of the big things we did is when somebody pays to get a full edit from us, we give them both versions, one marked up, untouched, just with notes and comments, and another one with 100% of the changes.
Hmm.
And I remember one of our editors was like, "You know how hard that is?" And I go, "Yeah." I was like, that's the whole point. They're paying for this. And not everybody, like me, I didn't go to school to be a writer. So I may just want to trust you. And that's my decision to do it or not, right? But
Mhm.
then we do audio notes for the cover letter so that you hear the tone from the editor, because we all know everybody can read something different. And we want you to hear somebody saying, "Hey, you might have a problem with commas. I noticed a couple different times you had this issue." You might read it, "You have a problem with commas. You need."
Mm.
So hearing the lighter tone from the editor allows the people who get our work back from us to calmly absorb it and not get defensive. Where I think a lot of people, when you're reading it, might. So that's kind of how the companies kind of came to fruition. And I'm just big on not making money. I'm in restaurants, publishing, and editing. So
That's right. So okay, so this is that really brings up a great point that there are several options for publishing. And so, you even talk about like how to review the publishing choices and determine the right fit for you. I mean, like what are like some factors that a writer should take into consideration?
well, if you're trying to get your story out there and you want a big audience, take your shot and look for an agent, even though it's going to take time, and go the big route. It may take, a year, but I tell people most time the second you finish your manuscript, day one, first or second draft, expect your book not to be released for 2 years, like
Hmm.
on average. If it's going to be done right, you have to build up an audience, you have to build up social media, you have to create buzz. I mean, look at the movie industry, how long they take from when they film a movie to when they edit it to when they start marketing it to when it releases. Like, and they have gigantic budgets and gigantic stars.
Right.
If you Charles and Amarillo with no following yet, to think you can sell a bunch of books in 3 months is just impatient. So if you're trying to just get it out there so you can sell it because you already have an avenue, maybe you're a business owner and you have like a pamphlet, maybe you're in real estate, you know, some, okay, go the self-published route,
Mm.
right? Because you're just trying to get it out there. If you want to create a slightly bigger avenue and you've got the money, hybrid publishing, if you do your homework, there are some decent ones, some others that are brutal. They charge you a bunch of money and they own your book, or others are just like kind of an avenue or a consultant along the way. And just know it's going to take time. And if you think you're done, just like a script, you're probably not. Like you, like especially in the beginning, you know, I think back all the times I screamed, and I always tell people I got so emotionally hurt, and my ego was so fragile with the feedback I got. I created two companies, one for publishing and one for editing. I got
So
just
it so
honest about it.
so it had a
Like,
bit of an effect on you, is what you're saying.
but now we try to work really hard to put people in an environment that they take the coaching, they take the support. I
Hmm.
mean, just the book we released this past October, Ray Franz, he's the great nephew of Al Capone's right hand man, The Heights. It's an amazing book. It was our biggest launch. It's about 1930s Chicago crime families. He took almost 2 years of rewriting and editing it. He had kind of a hand offer from a decent mid-sized publisher, one of the big fives, one of the bottom ones, but they weren't going to put nearly the work in we were, and he knew the story wasn't going to be done right.
Hmm.
And through a friend, reached out to us, and we helped him for over a year rewrite, edit, retweak, and even add. I remember we read the thing. I was like, the book's not done. He's like, there's like 120,000 words. It's like, yeah, but the story's not done. Like, finish the story, and then we'll edit it down. So we care more about the story. I'd rather publish 3 people a year, but do it right, and then
Hmm.
help 200 people or 2,000 people edit and get the publishing, you know, contract of their dreams as we try to grow this thing. So we just kind of focus on cool projects.
Okay, that makes good sense. Okay, so here's a really good question that, this is where book Puma factors into it. So when is the right time in your writing process to utilize an editor? Because, a lot of writers are going to say, I don't need an editor, I can do it myself. And as you probably have experienced, and I do, like, sometimes you're going to miss something, or sometimes it's clear to you, the writer, but for a reader, it's like, well, I'm not sure I understand why this is happening.
Yeah.
What are the benefits, apart from the basic stuff? What are some of the additional benefits to getting a professional editor to work over your stuff?
Well, I would say you always have the option too of like writing groups and ARC readers, advanced reader copies or beta readers.
Hmm.
Those are very important. You need at minimum 10 people who are going to tell you you're horrible, sad but true, and not tell you like, oh, it's amazing. Like it's more like it's amazing, but what was up with this one chapter, right?
Hmm.
You want honesty. And a good editor does that for you. Now, it's your job because it's your story to defend it and say, oh, no, it's this. But then the editor might say, yeah, but I don't know that because it's not in the book.
Hmm.
Like it may be in your head, but it's not clear on the pages. And that's the beauty of it. Like that's why we do calls more than just emails. We want that back and forth. We want to create that cultivating conversation. Some of the comments back and forth in Purdue, the back with between me and two editors, are a stitch. It's like half the time we're just talking smack. Like, but you know, it creates this environment of being challenged in a healthy man, like a football coach, right? Like you call that a tackle. I mean, it's kind of like, but we've created such a back and forth that it challenges me to be better, to push. And I look back on how I took feedback the first two books versus how I take it now. And it, like anything in life, it takes reps. I tell people all the time, you were born, you couldn't walk, you couldn't feed yourself, you couldn't even go to the bathroom. It took years of somebody doing it with you, for you, challenging you, pushing you, and you failing over and over again before the things you take for granted today, walking, eating, and going to the bathroom, to even function. So if you haven't put 10% of the effort that you probably did as a kid into those three tasks into writing a good story, don't be surprised if nobody likes it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can speak from experience. I know I can speak from experience as a screenwriter, that because, you put so much effort and time into this one thing, and then you send it out, and yes, it's great to have someone say, "Oh, this is great. I loved it. You're a fantastic writer." That's not always going to happen. And your reaction should be, "Okay, tell me, what do I need to fix to make it better?" And not, "How dare you question my genius?" because a lot of times a lot of writers they take the criticism and the notes personally, and they have to realize it's about the material, it's not about you as the writer. And yes, the material kind of reflects your ability as a writer, but you should look at it as a learning experience rather than a, just someone like casting judgment on you.
That's beautifully said. I think I always say it's the inner 4-year-old in all of us fighting over that fire truck we haven't played with in 6 months, right? Somebody touches it and we get all defensive. We say we put a lot of work into this, but anybody who's written anything knows half the work is sitting there banging your head against the keyboard, right?
Oh yeah.
So I don't think it's necessarily just the work. I think it's the self-doubt, the negativity that we have in ourselves, the don't want to be honest with ourselves that maybe we didn't put as much work into it as we thought, right?
Mhm.
And then when somebody gives us that feedback, instead of admitting, yeah, that chapter was horrible, we get mad. For example, in Ave Maria, there used to be like 4 or 5 chapters in that book where Neil was flirting with, hanging out, and might have hooked up with, I don't remember, a bartender. It had nothing to do with the story. Then looking back on it, I was writing it at a bar, flirting with a bartender at the time. So, like, a little self awareness and admitting to myself, this is just horrible. That has nothing to do with it. But it takes a little bit of just getting over yourself. Like,
Oh
I would
yeah.
say, I get mad. I get mad that I got mad. And then I spend about 30 seconds going, why did you get mad at getting mad? You got to solve
Hmm. No, I can totally relate to that too, because there's my last script that the like an early in the earlier drafts, I had like this 10 page sequence in the beginning that I loved it because it was so creative, and I thought it was just really a fun sequence to do. And I got more than a few people with their notes back saying, why is this happening? It's great
it.
it's great. No, it's great to look at, but it's taking us away from the main part of the story. And so I had to make that decision. Do I want to satisfy my ego and leave it in there, or do I want to do what's best for the story and just take it out? So I said, okay, I got to take it out. It, broke my heart, twisted the knife. I took it out of there, made some tweaks and to make it a smoother transition. Works perfectly now. And I find this happens a lot, that when you take something out or you make a change, that especially when it's something you're reluctant to do, that after you make that change, it just kind of it clicks into place. And you kind of think, like, how could I have missed this before? Like, why didn't I think of this before? It just works even better than I could have ever imagined. And then whatever you had before, it's either like if the material is good, you can just store it in a file for some use at a later date, or you just discard it. It's just kind of like, it seemed okay at the time. In the end, it wasn't. I didn't need it. And now what I have is even better.
So, what I'd say to a lot of writers who struggle with that is you might have needed to write that for your brain to get to the part that was necessary. So, don't think of it as a failure. Think of it more as a step in the process. One of my favorite things to do, I did while writing all those rough drafts. If I got stuck, I would write a random conversation between the main character and a background character, a bartender, a cab driver, whatever. And I would kind of like you would in real life. You're stuck, maybe you're at wit's end, and you're talking to a stranger because no one else will listen to you. A couple different times I left it in the story, like, and it works really well. But I was just trying to stay in that world to solve it, right? Because it was like if I try to think outside of the world, I may not understand it. Or the other thing I tell people is, you may have heard this from people. It's like, well, I had this great thought, and I was grocery shopping, but then when I get home, I forgot. And I try to explain to people your imagination is a muscle. Think of these fleeting, I call fleeting thoughts or these random imagination parts as shooting free throws in an empty gym. If you get stressed about, oh man, I hit 2 in the gym, but I couldn't hit it when I needed it. Stop worrying about the being able to carry it over and just enjoy the rep. Just enjoy the process. Just go on this imaginary ride while you're grocery shopping and don't stress about it. If you have it, you have it. If you don't, you don't. And remember, the more you use it and the more you enjoy it and the less you stress out about it. When you do sit down, you've had so many amazing reps that just run wild. you can tap into it freer without the stress. But you have to allow yourself to let them go. Because every time you tag it with negative stress, what do you think is going to happen when you sit down? You tagging your imagination with stress,
Yeah.
as opposed to what it should be. You want to tag it with dopamine. You want to just enjoy it. You want to be like, oh, that was fun. So that
Mhm.
when you sit down, the fun comes back. It really does. How we practice is how we play.
I
And you
want to
got to
touch
think about.
I want to touch on that really quick is that like sometimes like if you're at the store or you're driving around running errands that suddenly you get an idea for like this is a great great new thing I can put into the story. Just about everybody has one of these.
Yeah,
And it does have a notes feature on it. And so that's what I've made a habit of doing because every writer thinks, oh, I'll remember that later. You're never
yeah.
going to remember that
You
later.
never remember that.
You have to write it down somehow. You can like scratch paper on your desk or the little memo thing on your phone because you're kind of like freeing that little section of your brain that you
Yep.
don't have to worry about it. Like you don't have to like, oh, wait, oh, I had it. Oh, it was like the perfect solution to that problem, and you can't remember it. But if you write it down, like as soon as it hits, because if you get into the habit of doing that, that you like you said about like working a muscle, that just like as soon as inspiration hits, take advantage of that and write it down. I kept a file on one story for like 5 years. Every time I got an idea for that story, I would just immediately I would get to my computer, open that file, just write, even if it was like one or two sentences. And
Yeah.
I would just keep that going. And then I had enough stuff compiled after a few years, like, okay, I think I'm ready to actually put this into a
Now I can
story
write
now.
this.
And because if I had tried to remember all of that, like, 3 or 4 years later, there's no way I could have done that.
Yeah.
And granted, a lot of it, some of it I ended up throwing away, but I'm glad I had it there as a foundation to start.
Not only that, it probably sparks other inspiration. We had
Hmm.
an author we worked with for about 2 years. They actually signed a pretty big deal with. I think they're on their third book now. But they, instead of writing out the whole detail, did it like a crib sheet. So like maybe for like my character, if I had a thought of a new book instead of a new idea, instead of writing out or even speaking out two, three, 4 or 5 sentences, they would do like Neil, car wash, Becky, oranges, like because they still wanted the natural creativity and they didn't want to force it. And they were always afraid because they said they used to get a lot of the feedback they got was that they're forcing it
Hmm.
because they did take a lot of notes. So they shortened the notes to like keywords and key phrases to re-spark something in that area, but then kind of naturally let their imagination take off. And I was like, at the end of the day, it's just about finding what works for you and trying to minimize the stress and the negativity around it. And the other thing I always tell people is I hear this, we get this all the time. I work a lot. I sometimes I'm writing, sometimes I'm not. Like, it's not writer's block. You didn't forget how to write, right? I mean, okay, maybe if you've had trauma, you might have forgotten how to write.
Sure.
But oftentimes it's just life, right? Maybe there was a death in your family. Maybe you're working more at work. Maybe you're sick. Maybe you're not eating properly, right? And I always tell people like, start with that. List all the things that have changed in the last 30 days from when you were last, you know, and when you are on runs, make little notes in a calendar of the things you're doing. When did you get off of work? What time did you write? Because if you aren't paying attention to your body and what it needs to write, you can't get mad when you don't know what's wrong. I did a podcast for a year with this guy in London. We just were getting to know each other randomly. And we recorded it. Like it wasn't for anyone but us. And I got stuck. Book 3 and 4, Requiem and Colloquium. I wrote really fast, but I got stuck for like the last 10%. And he had challenged me to not eat meat for a week. He was a vegan, mainly for triathlons. He didn't do it for any like emotional reason. He just did
Hmm.
it because
For
runs.
health reasons.
Try it out. He's like, see what happens. I couldn't write for crud. Like it killed my creativity. And I literally one night I was like, I gotta finish this story. And I bought like 8 pounds of ground beef. Literally, I'm serious. I got sick, like really sick from all the ground beef, but I finished the book. Like I was trying everything. I mean, I tried alcohol first. I tried nothing. And finally I just sat down and ate a ton of red meat and it triggered, certain chemicals in my body and the autonomic response. And all of a sudden things started coming back. Just pay attention to your body. You never know. Like, so
Okay, for listeners and viewers, consult your doctor before making any extreme diet,
Before
before
eating
making any
8 pounds of
dietary limitations on yourself like that. Okay, so I want to ask you this one question. We've had this discussion on the show many times before. So as a writer, and this is it kind of alludes to what you were talking about before. So are you the type of writer who outlines like crazy, or do you just kind of like, I'm gonna see what the characters take me? Because personally, I outline like I'll outline a story and many times. I'll do several drafts of an outline before I think it's ready to be turned into script pages. And we've had writers on who like, yeah, I just, I come up with an idea and I can just jot it away, which astounds me because I just can't do that. So which category do you fall into, or do you have like a foot in both sides?
I'm the psychopath. Like,
You just
so
start.
I just start. So JT
Wow.
Ellison is gotten to know is I wouldn't say best friends, but they have each other's number. My editorial director and JT Ellison have done a couple different conferences together. They've gotten to know each other. I met her twice. She, from what they explained to me, writes scenes and then puts them on note cards and then rearranges them in a way that it makes the story work and then connects them.
Hmm. Okay.
Right. So she doesn't always plot it out, but she does, kind of write little chunks and then figures how to add them.
Like a bare
Uh,
bones foundation.
I sit down and just kind of go nuts.
Wow.
Um, I actually paid this lady in Ireland I do really well in the UK, who was a big fan. And she was like, I follow you on social media. I know you've got rough drafts of these other books. And I was like, well, I'll pay you to read them all because I have no notes on any of my books. So it's like, if you want to go back and like note them, like characters show up in this, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
That are out there. If you do a good job, I'll let you start reading the ones. So she had to read most of these books that haven't made it yet. And she gave me this roadmap. And she's like, you don't connect these? I'm like, nope. She's like, so she pointed out laughably, because I had no clue, the female spin-off series that goes into like Europe and all this history. Apparently there's like 18 Easter eggs in the second book of Neil Baggio that all
Wow.
that all tagged this other series. And she's like, how? And I was like, well, it's all in my head, so it's not surprising, right? Um, but I like to search my own writing. So I like to kind of go on these mini tangents where, oh wait, this was in book two, I think, right? Or was it book three? And I hit Control F and I search for a keyword or a character, and I just start rereading my writing, and then it puts me back in that scene. It puts me back in that, and then I can draw on it. If I like sit there and map it out, I force too much.
Hmm.
Like I've tried it. I'm like, I gotta get to the flag, you know what I mean? I gotta get to the pole. And it doesn't feel natural for me. So I just like to kind of because when I get going, I break keyboards. I've broken keyboards, not out of anger. Like I just will type so fast and so hard.
Wow.
So I've just learned to just enjoy it and do
Okay.
my best. And then sometimes you're in the research and editing phase, and sometimes you're in the, oh, it's gonna be this week and just cranking out writing. So
Hmm. Yeah, I see that's something similar is even though I outline, a lot of times it's almost like my subconscious is helping my writer's brain because I'll like work on a story and have elements in it. And I'm like, I might come upon a little snag of like, okay, I need to find a solution. So I'll go back and see what happened in like all of the previous pages. Is there something I can tie it into, or is there something that I can connect it to? And 9 times out of 10, there is like a little spark of something that triggers an idea like, oh, if I just make this slight adjustment, I can connect these things together. Oh my God, that works even better. And like all the puzzle pieces start to fall into place. And as a writer, it's great to like find that solution, especially when you didn't even realize you had a problem, or like, oh,
yes.
or you're like anticipating, oh, this is going to be such a mountain. I don't know if I can get over it. And then all of a sudden, boom, the mountain's gone because you were able to find a solution that you came up with, but you didn't even realize it.
that I like the problem solving. I like problem solving at work. And in the last 18 months, I've done a lot of historical retrospection with my family,
Hmm.
talking about growing up with certain traumas and where my bad habits come from. And safe to say, I have Superman syndrome. I fixed a lot of things as a kid for the trauma in the house, and it never went away. Like I'm like the first one to like, I will, like getting better. When your kids are in sports and you can't catch the ball in center field for your son and you can't play defense for your daughter in soccer, it forces you to kind of deal with stuff. But as a writer, you kind of have the control to create the horrible thing and then find a new way to solve it.
Hmm.
And that to me, I think fits. Like you said, why'd you become a writer? Why this? I think the natural part of my brain that likes to solve and fix allowed me to kind of go down that fun avenue, right? Like create these problems and then go, where's it coming from? I do have a question for you, and then
Okay,
you can answer both ways.
sure.
As a screenwriter, do you still deal with the horrible thing that the brain do known as echoing, where like you write the same sentence or rephrase it like two, three lines later without realizing it?
Not a few lines later, but you're always trying to find the right way to say something. It doesn't matter if it's dialogue or if it's in the action lines, because you also want to be really efficient with your words,
Right.
because I've said this many times on the show. One of the best pieces of writing advice I ever got was that write as if ink costs $1,000 an ounce. Because when you look at a page of a screenplay, the more white and the less text you have on the page, the better. Because you should be able to say things as smoothly and efficiently as possible, and not waste our readers' time with too much words on the page. Because a lot of times, like when a reader gets a script and they see a page that has like big blocks of text, like 5, 8 lines long, their heart is gonna sink, because it's gonna be a slog to get through that. And imagine 110 pages of that, and
Yeah.
that is not
Yeah,
fun.
they
But if
didn't
you
sign up to read a novel. They signed up
well,
like,
that's the thing, because some writers, especially when they're starting out, they think that I can take this. I have this idea. I just have to write it similar to a book, but it's just on a screenplay form. That if you can say the same, if you have a paragraph that's like 5 lines long, you can say the same thing in two. You are definitely ahead of a lot of writers, because that's part of the self-editing too. And
yeah,
a lot of editors and readers might make that note, like, you know, the story's really good, but you're just, there's too much going on the page. You have to really streamline it. That's what it comes down to, because you want to have a really smooth and easy read. You want to draw the reader's eye. Okay, they finished the next line. You want to make them keep going. But if it's, a lot of times I can tell at the bottom of the first page if this is going to be a good script, if the writer knows what they're doing, or if this is just going to be, oh God, I've got 98 more pages of this to go. And and it's,
I've seen it. I know what you're talking about. Like
yeah,
you're 2 pages in and you're like, oh,
yeah,
like
yeah. Because like with any kind of writing, it takes time and effort to like really to hone your skills to develop that craft. And so with the screenplay, that if you make the reader, you force them to turn the page, because they're so compelled, they're so caught up in the story. They want to know
right.
what they have to know what's going on. It's not just they want to know, they have to know. Like, oh my God, is he going to get out of this? Is she going to find the guy? Are they going to find the map? Are they going to find the treasure? Are they going to, get to City Hall in time? You want them to keep turning the page, like with a book, but it's just a lot more. It has to be more efficient on the page.
Well, I think I was joking that I've watched so many movies or TV shows where I never used to notice until I started writing, where I'm like, wait a minute, that's a huge hole that no one closed. Like, if this was a book, there'd be like 300 like complaints about this one little tiny, you know what I mean? But I do understand the brevity, right? Like you only have someone's attention for so long, right? And it's
Hmm.
whether it's, and then you also have to allow the creatives who are building the show, who are taking those pages and putting it, to life, some room to put their vision into it. Because they're going to anyway. So if you put too many rows, you know what I mean? The original story might get lost because they may not see what you wanted. So I think it's cool the way you described it. If you can write 5 lines into two, you're on the right path. That's a great way to describe it. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, you know what, Charles, this has been fascinating. And so for people who want to know more about you and your books, and, the, oh, sorry, I have to look up the name again. Blue Handle Publishing, and a book Puma, which now is branded into my head. So how can people
I'll
get in
send you some
touch?
swag for
Oh,
Book Puma.
oh, that
It's
would
a
be
pretty
awesome.
cool logo, man. It stands out.
That would be awesome. So how can people get in touch with you just to find out more?
Well, on social media, it's the same everywhere. It's Charles, the number three hats. The name kind of, I do too many things at once, so that's where the name came from. Book Puma Live, Book Puma Edit, for website, Blue Handle Publishing. We're also on all social medias, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We get a lot of people who hit us up on Facebook. I always laugh and think it's a dying platform, but when it comes to writers, well, X, not Twitter, and Facebook seem to be a huge platform that people find us and reach out. I answer my DMs a lot. If you have questions, ask. Um, and we do have a team. We give out free edits every month. Go to the website, put your question in, submit a manuscript. I know because I pay my editors all the time. I like people to just see that we're real and to build trust, and that's what it's about.
Okay, and we will put links up when this goes live. We'll put posts or links up on the assorted platforms that it's going to be placed on. So there's numerous ways to get in touch with Charles. Charles D'Amico, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was so much fun.
It was awesome, man. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay, and Charles has he provided all of his contact info, so we'll have links to that and right there above you, wherever you're listening to or watching this. Justin Sloan is not here, but would be remiss if I didn't promote his stuff. You can find him at Justin Sloan. His books are on Amazon. As for me, Paul Zeidman, you can check out my screenwriting blog, MaximumZ.blog. I'm also on Twitter. I'm not calling it by that other thing, at
I know.
Maximum_Z. I'm also on Instagram at Pez Screenwriting, PEZ. Those are my initials. Like you said, he's Charles. Justin, he's not here. I'm still Paul. This has been the Creative Writing Life podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy. Most importantly, go write something.